Welcome back to the Mountain Man Medical YouTube channel. Thanks for hanging out. Today I thought we'd change things up a little bit and talk more about mindset. A lot of the videos that I've been putting out is talking a lot about the different types of gear and skills and techniques that you can use to save your life or to save somebody else's. And all that's very important. You need to learn how to do that stuff. But one of the more important things that I think tends to get missed is mindset. How do we do these things and maintain a good presence of mind in a very stressful environment and then come out on top? How do we win in the midst of all of this chaos? And that's something I had to learn the hard way, and I kind of developed a good technique for that. But as it turns out, there's actually science that backs up what I'm doing. The thing that I'm doing is not new. This has been around for a really long time, and sports psychologists are researching this and developing this more and more for sports and high-level athletes. But this is something that you can do in your daily life that I think will make a huge difference in not only how you approach everyday life, but how you approach things in an emergency. So stick around, we're going to talk about that next. All right, guys, before we get into this video, do me a huge favor. Go down below and hit the like and subscribe button. That's a free way to support me if you think what I'm doing here is a good deal and you want to help me out. You've learned something, you want somebody else to learn something. Let's help spread the word, and that's a great way to do it. So I think mindset is a pretty important thing to constantly be thinking about. There's a lot of chaos that happens in the middle of an emergency. Most people can understand that. And a lot of people don't really know how to keep a good presence of mind, how to make good decisions, and how to maintain calm during a very bad situation, unless you've been in that situation so many times that you're more familiar with it and it's not that big of a deal. But getting that experience is pretty difficult. You got to put yourself into some pretty bad situations. And if the job that you're going for puts you into those bad situations on the regular basis, then this might not be as big of an issue for you. But if you aren't in the type of a job that you're going to be in an emergency all the time, how can you develop a feeling of calm in the middle of an emergency situation? How can you make the right decisions and know that with all confidence that you're going to be able to handle this situation? So this is a pretty good technique. I think it'll work really well for you, but it also has its downsides. Every technique and skill has its potential downsides that we need to pay attention to. And this one is no different. I think you need to pay attention to how to do this correctly. And if you don't, then you could set yourself up for failure. But if you do it correctly, I think you'll set yourself up for success. And that's what we want, right? We want to be successful in an emergency. We want to be able to save the lives of our family, ourselves, or maybe even a stranger. And so I think that this is a good way to do that. So I spent some time with the Marine Corps in Afghanistan. And before that, I cut my teeth on trauma in the ER. I was an ER tech and ran on the ambulance, and I got a chance to talk to all the doctors and get some good ideas on how to take care of trauma really well. But when it came time to go into combat, it was a whole different beast. Trying to do basic medicine when bullets are flying and explosions are going off and helicopters are doing gun runs, it's difficult, right? You have to have a different presence of mind. And the first couple of times that I was involved in that, I didn't handle it very well, to be honest. I know that that's a hard thing for me to admit, that I'm not always been amazing at trauma medicine, but I had to work my way into it just like everybody else. And I'm still, of course, I'm just trying to mess around here. I don't really believe that I'm great at trauma medicine. There's lots of people out there that are way better at this than me. But what I have is the confidence to know that if this situation gets really bad, I can handle it. I've been in that situation so many times before, and I've come out on top so many times before that this is not that big of a deal to me. But I wasn't always like that. At some point, I failed, and people died because I failed. And that's something that I have to live with on a regular basis, and it feels bad, but I also understand that how this kind of stuff works. You have to take all of this with a grain of salt. You have to give yourself the grace to know that you have things to learn and that you're not perfect and that you will try to become perfect, but it's going to be a while before you get there. You have to give yourself that grace and know, yes, I messed this up, but that's okay. Normal people would have messed this up. I did my best. I tried my hardest. I gave it a good shot, and that person still died. And that's an important thing to kind of think about, is that you can't save everybody. As a medic, you got to learn that early, or it's just going to eat you up and tear you apart. And if you just sit there and focus on the people that you didn't save, think about the things that you could have done differently, it's important to think those things. It's important to think about how you could have done things differently. But it's not a good idea to sit there and dwell on it. Learn your lessons, move it on, and be ready for the next event, the next casualty, the next problem, so that you can handle that more efficiently. So this technique that I'm going to talk about today, I call it daydreaming or fantasizing. But in the sports psychology world, it's called visualization or mental rehearsal. And this is a technique that they're teaching athletes who are injured how to get back onto the field more quickly and not have so much downtime. So when you're recovering, you're losing a lot of time when you could be becoming better at your sport, working on the mechanics and the tactics and all the different things that go into high-level sports. And when you have an injury, you're not doing any of that. And when you come back from an injury, it takes you a while to get back to where you were before. So a way to prevent that time from being so long, they started doing something called visualization or rehearsal. And they started having these high-level athletes imagining themselves going through these plays, going through the work and thinking about all of the tiny little actions that they would have to take, all the little mistakes they might make, all the little curveballs that they might get thrown at them. They're trying to work their way through how they're going to handle those situations. When I was in Afghanistan, I hadn't heard about this particular method until actually just a couple weeks ago. But I had a couple of events that I was very displeased with my performance in. I wish I would have handled those situations better. I knew the right thing to do after the situation was already done. Of course, you're going to know what the right thing to do is, and you're going to know that you didn't do that right thing, and it's going to sit there and eat at you. So as a way of compensating, as dealing with these thoughts constantly eating at me, I thought to myself, okay, instead of focusing on what I could have done better, let me start focusing more on how I can do it better in the future. And if you've ever been in the military and you've ever had to do foot patrols and all that kind of stuff, you know it can suck. It's really nasty. It's very hot and sandy. You're uncomfortable. You're drenched in sweat. Everything is very unpleasant. So as a way to kind of distract myself, I would start running through these scenarios. One of the other problems that I tended to see happen is I would start getting complacent. Whenever you're around danger for any length of period of time, eventually you're just going to get comfortable with it. And getting comfortable is pretty dangerous because then you stop paying attention to all of the threats, you stop wearing your safety gear, you stop taking things seriously. You just kind of forget it and it's not that big a deal. And some people might think that that's cool and that's a good way to go through an emergency. It's not that big a deal, you know, I'm just going to stand up and walk around even though bullets are flying. But for obvious reasons, that can get you killed. So as a way of trying to break myself out of that, I would start looking around me. I'd break myself out of that little thought pattern and I'd start looking around me. All right, where am I? What are we doing? Where are we at? Where are we going? If we get hit with an IED right now, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Where am I going to set up my casualty collection point? What kind of wounds am I going to be taking care of? How will I treat those wounds? What if I get a curveball? What if something happens? What if this happens? How will I handle the situation in that way? Now, the other thing that I was trying to envision while I was thinking about these things and running through the steps in my head like an elite athlete would do, I also wanted to visualize myself doing it like the best medic that ever walked this planet could do it. At this point in my deployment, I had the chance to see some of the best medics in Afghanistan do what they did. And they handled everything so calm and so coolly that it was very impressive to me. They could just walk onto something, someone's bleeding everywhere, bullets are flying, and they aren't even blinking. They're just running in, handling the situation, and everybody feels better when Doc shows up and knows what he's doing, right? Everybody likes to see that, especially the guy that's wounded, but everybody around them as well. You know, it's one of those things, if you're in a combat unit, you want to know that you might die. That's just something that you have to deal with. But you also want to know that if you get hit and there's a chance that you can live, that you're going to be given the best chance possible. So you want to make sure that you have a good medic on hand. And to see one of these experienced corpsmen go running in there and take care of this guy, even though bullets were flying and everything, I aspire to that. That is something that I really admired and something I wanted to cultivate in myself, but I didn't really know how to do that. So what I started doing while I was doing my complacency checks, you know, if I get hit with an IED right here, what am I going to do? How am I going to treat it? Where am I going to set up my casualty collection point? While I was thinking about all of that, I would also envision myself doing everything with such perfect competency, perfect confidence, and handling the situation like the best medic in the world. Like all of the medics that I had a chance to take a look at and watch and admire, I wanted to be like them. So I envisioned myself doing those things just like they did. I pictured how my face would look and how my voice would sound and the things that I would say to the casualty as I was running up. Be like, hey man, don't worry about it, I got you. And what I found was pretty surprising. After doing this for just a short period of time, I noticed I started doing it exactly like I visioned. Exactly. Not only was I making the right decisions, running before I even knew what was going on, I handled every little curveball that got thrown my way, and I did it like the best medic that ever walked the planet. And that was a huge eye-opening experience for me, because not only had I been able to conquer my confidence issues, my competency issues, all of my self-doubt just went away because I had seen myself do these things so many times, and it worked so well for me. Now, if you're like me, you're going to be thinking, this sounds too good to be true. This is way too easy. You just imagine yourself doing a thing and it's like you've already done it, but it really is that simple. And it's not, it's a little more complicated than that. There are some problems that we're going to go into here in a little bit, but the thing that you need to think about is that these scenario trainings work so well to be preparing you for a really bad situation. Let's look at the science, because this sounds ridiculous. Let's look at the science, because there's literal science. People are studying this stuff and they're thinking about what's going to be happening to them. So let me pull up my phone here and I'll read to you what the scientists are saying about this. So this is from former British Army officer and Olympic psychologist Charlie Unwin. And he had a TED Talk. I'm going to drop this into a link down below where I got this information from. It's pretty interesting. He talks a lot about this type of stuff. There's a lot more content out there, so if you're interested, go check him out. But something that he talks about is why this visualization works so well and what it allows us to do. He says, 1, it allows us to learn and reproduce skills more quickly, accurately, and smoothly. That 100% happened for me. I know that without a doubt. Number 2, manage your expectations and emotions more effectively. Absolutely. Worked very well. I was not scared. I wasn't lacking confidence. I made great decisions. My competency jumped through the roof. Absolutely true. Avoid repeating the same mistakes. My whole reason for starting this visualization path was because I didn't want to make the same mistakes I had made before. My lack of confidence, my lack of decision making caused me a lot of problems, and I did not want that to happen again. So through visualization, I changed that. Number 4, maintain presence of mind in a high pressure situations. We've already talked about that. No problem. Absolutely true for me. Number 5, experience greater commitment and motivation. I was already very committed and I was already extremely motivated, but I don't see why that didn't improve that as well. And the last one, number 6, experience more confidence in our own abilities. And I've already talked about that. Absolutely true for me. So 100%. The sports psychologists are looking at it. It's not just me. This stuff actually works. High-level athletes are doing it. I think you can do it as well. Let me read you this quote from The World of Sports Science, and this is about visualization. It says, visualization is intended to take the athlete to an image that conveys what perfection represents in a particular aspect of the sport. During visualization, the brain is directing the target muscles to work in a desired way. This direction creates a neural pattern in the brain, a pattern identical to the network created by the actual physical performance of the movements. So now it's talking more about like physical training, throwing a baseball, throwing a football, running bases, hitting, batting, all that kind of stuff. And that's all very important too, but I think it extends beyond that. I think it really extends to your mental output, how you view things, how you approach a problem and handle solutions. I think that this is a fantastic method for getting better at pretty much anything. I think that this is an excellent method for approaching all of life. And this is generally what I like to do whenever I'm tackling something new. I'll think about everything that I want to get done, all of the things that I wish I would be, and then I picture myself being that. And you have to put in the physical work. That doesn't go away. But if you do the physical work, the training, the practice, learning the skills, and you're also putting in the mental work of preparing your mind for a bad situation by envisioning yourself being incredible at it, I think you're going to do a great job. While this is a pretty great technique, it also has its downsides, just like anything else out there. Nothing is perfect, right? And the main downside of this is if you visualize yourself in the wrong way or envisioning yourself doing the wrong thing, then this isn't going to work for you. If you don't already know how to do medical, then you're not going to know what the right technique is for that moment, and you're not going to have any confidence. This visualization method doesn't work if you don't already know what to do. This is why training is so important. You can be the most confident person on the planet, but then if you don't know how to apply a tourniquet, that person's just going to bleed out and die. So confidence isn't the only thing. You have to be able to back it up with skills, and training is the only way that you can get that. I'm going to take a quick second to plug our free Mountain Man Medical online trauma course. 100% free, just takes a couple of hours, small, easy to watch videos. If you don't know anything about trauma medicine, that's a great place to start. So I've done a lot of trauma classes, and I've taught a lot of different types of people from the military and civilians. And generally, when I teach civilians, I get a lot of comments, things like, hey, how do you handle the blood? And they would come up to me kind of cautiously and to the side and under their breath. I feel a lot of embarrassment from people, especially men, who come up to me and say things like, hey, I don't know how to handle a situation or a bad situation. And they would come up to me and ask how I would handle all this blood. And at first, I was really surprised by that question, because I would think to myself, like, well, you have to. If you don't, someone's going to die. And that's a pretty good reason for me to go out and get this thing done, right? But for them, they just couldn't see themselves winning. They couldn't see themselves handling this situation correctly. They would say things like, I could never do that. I could never handle all of that blood. I would just pass out. And the main difference between me and them is not that I'm better than them at all this stuff. The only difference is how we are visualizing ourselves succeed. I had the chance, I forced myself to view myself as the hero. I'm going to run into that situation and I'm going to be the best medic that ever walked this planet. And I'm going to give it my best shot to make that true. It's not going to be true, but I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that it's going to be true. But what they're doing is that they are doing the same thing that I am. They are visualizing, but instead of visualizing themselves be the hero, they're visualizing themselves falling apart. Whether you visualize yourself succeeding or whether you visualize yourself failing, you're right. You're going to do whatever you visualize yourself doing. So be careful that you're not visualizing yourself doing and being the wrong way. Visualize yourself succeeding. Don't set yourself up for failure. Start with good thoughts of you winning, and then everything else will just fall into place. But above everything else, make sure you're getting the training and visualizing so that all of this will work out for you. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks again for hanging out and checking out this video on mindset. If you've ever been in a really bad situation or multiple situations, and you have a lot of experience in emergencies, please drop something down in the comments down below. Let me know if you do the same thing that I do or how you do it differently. I would love to know that. I think that this mindset kind of stuff is one of the most important parts about emergency medicine. It doesn't do you a whole lot of good to know everything if you just freeze up and shake and you can't get anything accomplished. You got to be able to do both. And this is a great way of learning how to stay calm in a really bad situation. So if you've ever been in a situation like this and you have different techniques, or maybe you've tried this technique and it didn't work for you, let us know what does work for you. That's pretty important. There's a lot of people out there who really need this information, and I think it would be pretty beneficial. So drop a comment down below, help everybody out. Last time, if you got anything out of this, drop a like and subscribe. Free way to help me out. If you need a trauma kit or training, head over to the mountainmanmedical.com website. Check out the Yellowstone and Wind River trauma kits and be ready for whatever the mountain throws at you. I'll catch you guys in the next one.